Lionel, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Stephen, for some Stephen?
Lionel.
For some reason or other, and I really have I can't put my finger on it, but I didn't ask anybody to join us. And for some reason, I kept thinking, I'll get Bruce or I'll get Chris Atkins or somebody. And I kept thinking, no, I just want to talk to Stephen myself. I'm hogging you all to myself tonight.
There you go.
And I don't know why that is. I can't really put my finger on it. I did ask Uncle Dave, only because of one of the things we're going to talk about, but he wasn't available. And I went, yeah, whatever. And then I was just like, yeah, I really don't need anybody to join us. I'm quite happy like this.
You've got your list of things, and you're going to get to the bottom of them.
Exactly. And it's been a while since we talked.
I was trying to think when the last time we spoke, and I really couldn't come up with it as on the interview at least.
You sent me a big long message about the T-shirts, which I completely ignored.
Yep.
But I thought it was well written. And we can talk about that. And I don't know, we're good. We're pretty good pals. So I just thought, if we manage to kill an hour and a quarter, man, that's a show.
All right, yeah.
Anything less than that, it'll become part of an all-star variety hour. But I don't think we're going to have any trouble talking for an hour and a quarter. We never have any trouble talking for an hour and a quarter ever.
No, yeah, it generally goes much longer past that. Much longer,
because right now you are in New York City.
Yes, I'm in my apartment in New York.
You finally got to get back in your apartment.
My apartment, the cleaning process that had to take place after I got back was a little gross. There was just a layer of New York grime and gunk all over everything.
And you had all the windows closed, obviously.
The AC was the window AC unit was in my window when I left, and so it was there for 2 years. And so there was like a 6-foot half circle around my window that was just absolutely disgusting.
I saw you have on your wall there a map of the world. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm not one for painting that much, but the vinyl decals, you can buy vinyl decals that are full wall things. And I thought, well, that's a good way to quickly just put something on the wall without having to worry about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. How much did it cost for that?
I don't even remember. It's been probably 5 years since that went up.
Oh, okay. We have a big, gigantic automotive flea market here twice a year. And when I was there a couple of years ago, I got the guy to type out in letters Stinky's iPad, because that's my nickname, Stinky. And it was like, you can do so much with that vinyl stuff now.
Yeah, and it makes, should I ever want to put something else on the wall, I can just peel it off and throw it in the trash.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of buddies, actually, and they're not young kids, they're older guys, but they put stuff on their pickup. They'll put, a design in the last third of the side of their pickup truck, like waves or blue or, some kind of hip little design. And then it's put on with vinyl, whatever that thing is where they put vinyl on cars and anything, and they put it on. And one day I said to the guy, what if you ever get tired of it? He says, I just take it off. And
that's the nice part about it.
Yeah, it comes off. So I put a little orange stripe on my car. I wanted my car to look different from all the other cars that I have that are like mine. So I put a little orange stripe on it.
I've watched some videos about the detail painters for cars, and they'll you look at something and you're like, wow, that's clearly vinyl down the side, and then you watch a guy just pinstripe by hand, just no problem at all. And I'm like, man, I can't even paint the windows on my models without making a mess.
I know. I used to buy a lot of Nissan cars from a golfing buddy, and I became friends with the sales manager and the salesman. And this is back, we're talking 40 years ago now. And he would hand do pinstripes down the side of the car. the sales manager. He had the ability and it was like, hey, you want me to put pinstripe on your car? Okay, how much is that? No, I'll do it. And I'd go over and he'd do it for about an hour and he'd get it. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Those were the good old days. Those were the good old days before technology.
I have problems not shaking my hand not shaking just on normal stuff, let alone trying to concentrate on something.
Well, how old are you now?
38.
Ah, yeah. Well, you're still a pup, and don't you get tired of guys my age saying that to you?
It was I always felt like the young person in theater. Even when I was 30, I was still much younger than most of my colleagues. But now I'm finally starting to see a younger group coming behind that I don't feel like is my same age.
Yeah.
That it's like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Soon, a couple more years, you're going to be in the big 40s. And then things are, you're kind of like, and then I get to say to you at some point in there, in the next 5 years after that, I said, so how do you like middle age? And you'll look at me with this frozen stare and I'll go, well, how many people older than 88 do you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I was talking to 100 years ago with somebody we're going to talk about tonight. He was talking about middle age and he was like 54, 55. And I went, how many 108-year-olds do you know?
Right. You're on the downside of middle age.
Buddy. Yeah, you passed middle age about 10 years ago, sport. So the reason this conversation started is because somehow you ended up operating it. Oh, yeah. Uncle Dave told me that he was at an operating session with Tony Koester at Tony Koester's house. And he says, oh, I finally got to meet Stephen Atwell. Cool guy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where did you meet him? At Tony Koester's house. What was he doing there? Well, there was an operating session. And I went, wait a minute. Are we talking about the same guy? Stephen Atwell, model railroad operations, it's Tony Koester's house. I was like, I wasn't piecing it all together.
Yeah, it was, I had operated on a layout here in the Bronx, Phil Monat, and they told me there was an operating session at Tony's the following weekend and asked if I was interested in going. And quickly, a couple people responded on my behalf that I'd be stupid if I wasn't at least interested in going. And I said, okay, let me look at my calendar. And I got back to him the next day and said, yes, I would be interested in going. And one of them on my behalf reached out to see if I could go. And I went out there as a guest a couple months ago now. And I guess I didn't screw up too bad because I was invited back.
Yeah, and then and I was like, as soon as I heard that from Uncle Dave, I immediately shot off a snarky message to you on Facebook Messenger and saying, so you're operating at Custer's house these days, are you?
Yeah.
And you shot back with, yeah, well, I was at Phil Monat's house. Did you at least tell him that he's pronouncing his wrong name?
I did not. I'm going to avoid that conversation.
How did you get invited to Phil's house?
I met Phil at the shop in Kansas City. His mother, I believe, lives within a couple miles of Midwest in Kansas City.
Really?
So he came in there and seeked me out and introduced himself. And, when you get back to New York, reach out to me. He actually only lives probably 4 miles from me.
Really? Okay. So for those that don't know, and I don't know how you couldn't possibly know unless you've never, ever listened to this podcast before, we're talking to Stephen Atwell, who is the owner of Midwest Model Railroad. Stephen, have you ever wanted to, and I'll ask you later, and you own that with your dad and your mom, mostly your dad, right? Is he still involved? Or?
Yeah, he's there, I think, 5 days a week.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, for at least most of the operating day. 5 days a week, I believe.
Yeah, I remember saying to you once you were beating him like a rented mule.
Yeah.
Because how old's he?
He was born in 1955. So
he's 67 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, give the guy a rest, will you? How long you had that shop now? How long have you been out of the basement?
We've been out of the basement 4 years, I think it is.
It's way more than that.
No, I think it was. I think we moved out January of 2019.
Really?
When was it was
No.
NMRA Kansas City was in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
and we moved out pretty much immediately following Inumari, Kansas City. Or we started looking for property immediately following Inumari, Kansas City, and I think we moved in. I think we had our unofficial grand opening in like March of 2019.
Oh, that's right, because Ron Marsh went to a party at your house.
Yes.
And he was all excited because he was at a party with a guy that works on Broadway whose play was nominated for a Tony or something.
Right.
Exactly. Now, that's who I should have asked to join us was Ron Marsh. But I wanted to have I'm not recording this, so don't worry.
Yeah.
Okay. Really? It's like 4 years? That's crazy.
Yeah, we can't seem to stay settled in the same place for more than about a year and a half. So
I can't get over that, because when was I there for the first time? It must have been just after you opened.
I think, you and Tony went on that road trip summer of 2019, fall of 2019?
Yes.
And came through at the end of that road trip.
Right. When you were in the other store.
Yeah, that was the small store.
And now, so in 4...
I mean, I say small, but it was still...
Oh, yeah, it was 3,000 square feet or something?
Yeah, it was still large for most model train stores, it seems.
You're not supposed to grow that fast. 4 years? Man, you have packed a lot of action into 4 years.
Yeah, we got to take a breather. It's exhausting.
I would have
yeah. All of the changes were exhausting. And because every time we change, right, like we have to come up with we have our processes down. So every time we do a big change, we need to learn new processes and new flows, product flow type stuff, and how are we going to deal with this process in the larger space? Yeah.
But I mean, so let's just recap. So in 2017, you started in like 4 years before that, didn't you?
2011, I believe, is our first year.
So you and your dad primarily started it as really a way to get stuff cheaper for your layout, and you started kind of a online kind of in scale only order stuff.
And really we were focused on consolidating in scale details so you could sort of just get all your bits and pieces at one place.
Right. So you did that for 4 or 5 years, and then it just continued, and that was in like 400 square feet in the basement of your dad's house.
Correct. Eventually it took over like 1,200 square feet of the basement. But yeah, it started very small.
And then you moved into this 3,000 plus store in Independence, Missouri.
Yeah, we found, mentally we were prepared for, we just need a warehouse space, if people want to come in and shop in our house. So we weren't worried about road frontage. So we were on the corner of a building onto a side road. And, it worked out well. The building was already mostly what we were looking for. We did minimal changes. There was a weird pipe rack thing built in there and a wall that stuck out along a pipe rack because the pipe rack was 24 feet long. Let's not have that thing sticking out in the middle of the room. So like minimal changes for the landlord that they agreed to pay for on their behalf or on their side.
Yeah.
Which made the space very reasonable. Minimal upfront cost to get into that space.
That's like when I moved my office. I was in the same complex. And I had later found out that the guy had sold the entire complex. There's a complex. It's buildings like what you are, one-level buildings. But these were in like I don't know what you call some sort of office park. And there was like maybe 10 different buildings in this fairly big office park. And they're all one level. And the guy had sold it. And he came to me wanting me to move to a better space out closer to the road that was bigger. And I'm like, well, I don't want to spend. Oh, no, and he fixed the entire thing up. It literally cost me, even to the point where I was like, well, I don't want, now I got to get a new letter. I'll pay for that. Don't worry about it. And it literally cost me like $700 to move. And finally, I said to the guy, what's the deal here? Well, he had made some great, fantastic deal with somebody, but he had to have 100% occupancy of this place. And so part of it was somebody wanted my space and the space beside it, so he moved me to another space. It was a sweetheart deal.
Yeah, they needed the two spaces that they could put together.
Yeah, and they just needed me somewhere else, and it was like whatever. And of course, to him it was insignificant amount of money. And but yeah, that's so then okay. So, but enough about me. Okay, so then you were there like a year and a, because I remember going into that one and you explained to me how basically it was a warehouse for the website, Midwest Model Railroad.
Yeah. Yeah, we were there for, we started seeing problems at about a year. Just because, I mean, it was dense. Like you were in there, the
Yeah.
product was in there very densely. Um, picking was not difficult, but shopping the space was difficult. We had more people in there than we thought we would ever have in there. We didn't think we'd see a lot of shoppers show up, so we weren't really concerned with the density of the product. And it was like, yeah, if you want to know where the Digitrax decoders are, you have to ask because they're in a bin and they're filed sideways, and we can flip through and get it for you. But if you didn't know that, you wouldn't even know where to start looking. But really, when we started to see larger orders show up, right, as our reputation grew, we would move more product of each release, so we would need to get in larger quantities, and we had nowhere to do large amounts of receiving like that. Once a month we would get a pallet of boxes, and that would be the largest thing we'd get, and it was literally like we'd open the double doors that are on the back of the building, and we would set the pallet of boxes partially in the building and partially out of the building, and just unload them as fast as we can, toss the pallet on the back of the building, and close the doors. When FedEx and whatnot would arrive, FedEx, UPS, maybe there's 15 boxes, and we could kind of stack them up in front of the double doors, or we'd left some space under the racks along that wall. But all of a sudden, when we're getting a pallet a week of merchandise, there wasn't space for that. So all of a sudden, like, stuff was spilling out into the aisles as far as inbound, or we'd have to find a time that, okay, we have to stop shipping for today because we need to take over the shipping room to move all this merchandise in, and then we need to work this evening with whoever can come in to try to get through this merchandise to get it on the shelf so that we have space to move around again for tomorrow's shipping. So it pretty quickly ended up like, well, this worked well for a year, but if we want to continue to grow, we're going to have to figure out, we need a receiving facility, or we talked about that for a bit. Do we just there's another 3,000 square foot space in this facility? Do we maybe move shipping and receiving there, and we just get a little golf cart type thing, pick in the store and drive it down to shipping? Same thing with receiving. Receive it all, spread. We'll have the space to spread out, and then we just stock the shelves. But then the more we looked into that,
a bigger space came available at the front of this. At the front, it's a typical one level plaza that you see all over, and then a bigger space, like what, 6,000 or 9,000 square feet or something.
Yeah, it's the people that used to be in there was a florist distribution company, and they had 15,000. They had 21,000 square feet. And their parent company wanted to consolidate all of it into one huge distribution center somewhere else in Kansas City. So they were leaving, and all of a sudden the landlord said, "Hey, wait a second. We've got this 21,000 square feet we don't know what to do with.
Right.
Would you be interested in?" And so we were looking at that, and we were looking at 6,000, and then of the 21,000, it's broken up into 3,000 foot segments. Each 25-foot storefront is 3,000 square feet. And on one side of it was offices. On one 3,000 was the offices, bathrooms, reception, and all that for them. And then it was warehouse for 18,000 square feet. And the 6,000 square feet of warehouse we wanted because of the facilities on the back. It has the garage door, it has a man door on the back. That's all we were looking for. Anywhere else we went, there was like at least, those two, that one, if we take those two on the end, we don't have a warehouse door, or we didn't have a man door. And it was like, okay, this is what I want. And unfortunately, but it was in the middle, right? Like there's 6,000 they knew that they would never be able to rent the office space as is.
Right. Yeah.
So they didn't want us to take the 6,000 square feet next to it. And so we went he said, well, what if we just take all three?
And you weren't even happy at that point. Now, how big is the store now? 15,000 still?
15,000.
You managed to stop it there.
We're gonna stay there for a while.
Has business fallen off much after COVID?
Business has slowed. I mean, a couple things happened at the same time. People started going back to work in larger numbers. As we went into 2022, people started going back to work in larger numbers, so they had less free time.
Right.
And then supply chain / inflation / all of this stuff has made it more difficult or money for trains for people is generally become less as money for other things is more important.
Sure.
So as milk and eggs and gasoline get more expensive, train budgets go down a bit. And then on top of that, we rolled into the summer. So May, June looked pretty rough. May, June, July looked pretty rough. We're ready for a train season to start for sure.
Okay. But that's all part of, you must think to yourself, well, this has got to be all part of the learning process of having a store this size and being this successful. And, like you're wading through so many, like, hey, let's start a business in 2011. And then hopefully in less than 10 years, there'll be a massive worldwide pandemic that we'll have to navigate through.
When we finally understand how things work, let's change how everything works.
Yeah, exactly. But, okay, so business has slowed down, but that's, some of that is part of people going back to work. Some of it is the summer, blah, blah, blah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't get a sense, really. I get a sense that the industry has slowed down somewhat, but not massively.
No, and when new stuff comes out, we still see a huge spike for new stuff. Like Atlas just came out with some 53-foot spine cars in scale.
Right.
I think they got listed on Wednesday, and our warehouse guy texted me just this evening and said, "Did I screw up and forget to put a quantity on the spine cars? They're all out of stock on the website." And I said, "No, I don't think so. I think 3 days was it. I think they're gone."
Wow.
It was literally so when stuff is landing that people want, it's not, they're still finding a way to get it.
Have you found foot traffic has continued to grow over the years?
Foot traffic does continue to grow. It's funny, advertising for foot traffic is really, really difficult. Google and Microsoft and Facebook and everything make it really easy to get your name out there about an online store.
Right.
But getting your name out for, hey, actually stop by is something that we haven't really figured out how to do yet.
Haven't mastered.
So, word of mouth is our best draw. People that have shopped from us before that think, wait a second, Kansas City, I live close to Kansas City. I can't believe this shipped from the Kansas City area. And they look it up and they're like, oh, I can go there. And they walk in and then they're like, oh, crap.
Yeah. Well, that's what that's what I say on the podcast. It's like walking into a real live Walther's catalog.
Yeah, it's funny. I spent most of 2020 and 2021 there, and watching people walk into the store, you can immediately tell whether it's their first time in the store or not as they open the door.
Yeah.
They generally make it about a step or two past the carpet, the wipe your feet carpet at the front door, and then just stop dead in their tracks, and they're just like, and there might be people behind them that have been in before that just like zip around them because they know it's going to happen. Like, yep, this guy doesn't know, and right off to where they need to go, and they're just standing there at the door like, holy crap, where do you even start?
Well, that's the thing. You go into your store, it's literally, where do you start?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like every once in a while when I'm looking to kill an hour or something and I don't feel like doing anything other than entertaining myself, I'll go to the local Lowe's or Home Depot and just look at the tools.
Yeah.
And just walk through the tools. And it's like it always kills an hour because you never get to see them all and you're touching them all. And I mean, if somebody went to your store for the first time and wanted to give it a thorough once over, even if they were strictly looking at HO stuff or strictly they'd need 2-3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. HO is sort of in 3,000 square feet by itself, but it's pretty densely in 3,000 square feet by itself. 3,500 square feet probably. And so like just walking through that section, you're going, and the shelving is 6 foot tall.
Yeah.
And we try to keep it, knee height to eyeball height, but there's a lot of stuff.
Push the microphone out from your mouth about
out from my mouth
a little bit, just like a quarter of an inch.
There it is. How's
okay.
That?
It's important. And now take a Sharpie and just mark on the side of your face where it is.
Just draw a shadow for myself.
Yeah. And then you'll know where. Okay, I'm on your website now. And just to give people an idea of what we're talking about, you have a Google rating of 4.9. That is with 347 reviews. I'm very proud of my business. I also have a Google rating of 4.9 with approximately 260 reviews. And you've got 4.9 with 340, which basically, to me, I always say when I'm talking to my, somebody in the business, my secretary or my son or something, I'll say, if Google ever figures out how to charge you for this, because Google ratings now are like the best word of mouth. It's like the old world of small town business. You look for a restaurant. If it hasn't got a Google rating of at least 4.3 or 2, you're not going.
Yeah, you just don't bother.
Yeah. And I mean, you got a 4.9 Google rating with 347 reviews. Like, that's spectacular. So
yeah,
even if you're there, even if you're not there, it still works.
Yeah, and it's Google ratings, man. They're their own beast. They count into weight. They're weighted on how you appear in local search. But getting people to leave Google ratings was actually
that's hard.
A long and hard task to figure out how to get it done effectively. And now and it wasn't until I bet we had less than 100 Google ratings at the beginning of 2022.
Really?
And now we finally figured out how to get it done well and how to get people to respond to us as far as Google ratings goes. And we get 3 a day or so, 2 to 3 a day.
Yeah, like here's one called West Coast Traction Supply. Good items, quickly shipped at a reasonable price 3 days ago. Good quality product service from another guy. Wow, Joe DiMaggio. Oh no, Joe Maggio. items carefully packed and arrived. These are all 5-star. Received my order quickly, in good order with no bad back orders. Here's one. Midwest Model Railroad is one of the finest online hobby shops I've ever dealt with over the past few years. Excellent selection, good pricing, and the products. Easy to order online, fast delivery. Truly went out of their way to make sure. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I mean, man, you got to be proud of that.
Yeah, I was actually, I don't want to say I was concerned by what the Google rating was to say. I was concerned, like, I've been asked to do Google reviews for other companies before, and, I always leave a comment and I never know what to put. So it's always like, great customers, something basic. But most of the people who leave us reviews actually like call out specifics, which is something that shocked me. I was, I'm glad that we're doing something that actually makes people want to actually put a thought into their message rather than just be like, A+ 5 stars. Like,
yeah, exactly. Well, here's one guy named Richard. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. Again, fellas, you hit one out of the park. Everything arrived well packaged and as I ordered it. I mean, people love. But I mean, that's what, I've been saying that for years. It's a great store. And I mean, and anybody I talk, rarely do you, I mean, everybody has problem customers. That's part of the world. But I mean, everybody loves Midwest Model Railroad. You got to be awfully proud of yourself that here you are 4 years out of the basement. You got 15,000 square feet, 350 Google reviews with a 4.9 rating. I mean, man, you got to be pretty proud of what you've accomplished.
I remember the first time I walked into. Did I leave for a while and come back? I think I left after we had sort of gotten the full 15,000 space in. I left for a while and then came back. And I remember walking into it for the first time when it was like, running smoothly without me there.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, just as I walked through the door, I was the person who stopped 3 feet in front of the door and looked around, and I was just like, oh my God, what have we done?
Yeah. And now here you are. Well, and okay, so now you've hit a slow patch, but I mean that's part of being in business. I mean, I've been self-employed since I was in my early 20s or mid 20s, and that's the up after 40 years. That's the ups and downs of being self-employed. You know, you're going along tickety boo, and you're thinking, okay, now what size yacht can I get? And then all of a sudden the bottom falls out, and now you're not making any money for a while, and then you start making money, and as the years go by, those gaps get smaller and smaller because your business becomes more and more well established, and you're more prepared for it each time. So this is just part of the excitement. You just won't pay yourself for a couple of years. That's all.
Yeah, it's actually yeah.
What?
As soon as I collect a paycheck, I'll be happy.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but you guys plow. You're nothing but. You plow every dollar you make back into this business.
Yeah, I mean, we were able to grow quickly because, I mean, it's a long-term business for me.
Sure,
but
yeah.
right now, like it's not the thing that I need to put bread on the table.
No, because let's remind everybody, you started out, and what you're doing right now, you're living in New York City in your apartment because you're an electrician on Broadway.
Yeah, and so I mean, and literally the second I was called to come back to work, I was like, all right, see you later. Like, I'm booking my plane ticket now. See you, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, there was no like, well, I don't know if it was just simply, I'm out the door. Good luck. Figure, we'll work through whatever comes up. Bye.
Yeah, because you love being on Broadway. You love the theater, being an electrician and being part of the theater scene of New York City and Broadway and all that entails.
Yeah, and I just can't imagine leaving it behind.
And what is it, do you think, that is so appealing about that? I mean, was that something you wanted to do as a kid somehow, or?
No, it didn't interest me at all until I was I liked theater. At least by the time I got to high school, I enjoyed theater. But I was never really interested in a career in theater until I was in college, when I literally just took a college job working at a theater. I needed to get, beer money.
Right.
And that seemed like an easy way to do it. And the people around there seemed fun. And, by my fourth year in college, I was getting job offers to work in production.
Wow.
Versus accounting. And I was like, wait a second, I enjoy this job. That job seems like it's going to be miserable on a day-to-day basis. Why would I not do that? And that's what I did. I went for it.
I'm going to apologize to you right here on the air. Here at the old AML network, transparency is number one. Accuracy, not so much. But transparency. So I'm scrolling through your website. So I got to offer you an apology right now. So I'm scrolling through your website, and I come down to the part where it shows puzzles, board games, slot cars, pine car, and modeler's life. And there's that picture of that drawing you made of me behind a desk and a couch. And honest to God, that made me laugh. That is the funniest. That is. Now I get it. Because I didn't get it at first. I only have now. That is funny. That's a good
looking picture.
Yeah.
I was very, very happy with the artist's work on that one.
I was blown away. I saw Dave Barraza, who lives on Long Island, and he was at an operating session at Tom Jacobs' house, and the first operating session ever at Tom Jacobs' layout. And they all stood outside and took a group shot. And there's Dave Barraza wearing his hoodie, his Modeler's Life hoodie, and he had ordered one with that on it. Yeah. And I'm like looking at it like, seriously? And now here I see it, and I'm like, now that's funny. I like that. That is actually, it looks perfect. That's the best I've ever seen it. Now I get it. Now I see what you were going for.
Yeah, it's the artist that did that for us. He was like, "You want me to draw what?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's going to be, trying to describe a couch to him that was." And then he came back with a couple drawings of a couch, and I was like, "Yeah, really, like that crappy one. That's what I'm going for." And he was like, "Okay."
And the likeness of me is like just bad enough and just close enough that it's like it's hilarious. It's like now I get it.
Right, and we did a maple leaf on the hat, I think.
I think so. Yeah. You're screwed up. All right. So okay. What show are you working on right now on Broadway?
K-pop the musical.
Ah, featuring Britney Spears.
No, Luna. Luna's in it.
Ah, Luna.
Apparently, that's a K-pop star from some point in time. This one I have no idea. I mean, you know what? I'm going to collect my paycheck and do my job, but I don't know what the hell is happening.
What's the best show you ever worked on?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, there must have been a show where I think you told me there about a year ago or something. There was some show that you were working on that you really enjoyed.
I mean, I did the Evita tour, and I really enjoyed that tour just because of the crew that I had on that tour, the electricians that I had on that tour.
Right.
Made it I mean, the show was incredible as well, but like that the electricians crew on that show made it made it so much better. That one sticks out to me. There are a few shows that I actually like. I worked on the Prom for a while, and had I watched it every single day, I probably only did 30 of the shows as a sub, and then I filled in for a few weeks. I really enjoyed running that show. Like,
right,
it was fun to run, but I think if I had to do it every day for a year, I probably would feel differently about it.
Yeah,
but there was enough excitement in the show that even something that I'm seeing on a daily basis kept me engaged.
So when you went over to Phil Monat's house, for next time you go by, you got to say, the next time you see him, you got to say, Lionel says it's Monet.
Yeah.
He's a guy that was on the podcast, and all he did the whole time he was on the podcast say he thought podcasts were stupid.
I had heard that you pronounced it Monet, and even though he was in the green room, he screamed down the hallway and told you that was incorrect.
Yeah. So, of course, with me, well, now you've just pushed the button, buddy. I wouldn't do it, except he's got a good personality and he can take a joke. But it is Monat. The proper pronunciation of Phil's name is Monat. So was that like, had you done much operating before you went to his place?
The only operating I'd really done was sort of just as we want to with JMRI sheets. Never anything controlled. And Phil's layout is, it's got a dispatcher that everything's called through, and so that was a learning process. And then Tony's layout is train table.
Yeah,
timetable, train order.
Yeah. Well, but what's Phil's layout like? Like, I mean, according to Uncle Dave, it's pretty spectacular.
It is. It's funny. It's almost as old as I am. There's a note on the rafters of like key dates, and as I was walking through one day, I think I noticed it says like 1988 when the first, when it first got started, and I was like, wait a second, that's 34 years ago. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's shoved into a New York basement, so it's not. In order to get, it's a long run, but it works through. You end up going to run the layout like 3 times, but all on different. It's like It's like a multi-level layout, all smashed down into one level.
And it's kind of an old style plan where the track keeps winding around on itself.
Yes. And the scenes are done really well so that you may have, in this, as you work your way around the room, this 4-foot section has, a heavy industry thing and a lot of stuff on, let's say, level 1. And then as you continue on level 1, it's very scenic on very close to the front edge of the layout as it works its way through for a while, because as you come back through that same area on level 2, you're up 8 to 12 inches and you're going through a different scene that has all the, so you can have industries that are 60 feet a track apart, immediately adjacent to each other, pretty much,
right,
at different levels. And it works out really well. I mean, I think there was probably 10 to 12 operators in that space one of the days that I was there.
How many times have you operated there now?
I think I've only operated at Phil's once with a full crew. And then I've been to Phil's another time for a work session, and he had me run a train just because he thought, it's your first time here, you shouldn't come up. And I was working a lot of the time, so it was my day off.
Right.
And he was like, no, you don't need to work on your day off. And I was like, no, I'm here. I don't mind working.
Right.
But he was like, no, let's get you a train to run. So we ran the train. I ran the train, and then I worked.
Yeah. And how did that come about that you ended up going visiting? So he came into your shop, kind of introduced himself, and did he know of you before then, or?
I guess he knew of me through the podcast.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Phil's an avid listener.
Yeah.
Certainly to the one he was on, anyways. Well, I know he knows a bunch of guys that listen to the podcast, so they probably told him about you and the store and all that. So that's pretty cool because you're kind of starting to immerse yourself into a new part of model railroading.
Yeah, I hadn't been much of an operator, and the guys up here, there's a whole round robin thing. I got an email about an operating session that, hey, it's going to be a week earlier because I swapped with so and so, and they're going to be the following week, and any chance you can come out that week and it's just like, I mean, I'm about to go into tech, so I'm going to get 24 hours off a week. So I think my operating's probably stopped for a couple months. But yeah, it's like there's operating sessions. What seems like every weekend if you're inside a circle.
Inside the circle. And what is tech that you're talking about?
Theater tech for this show. We're finishing up load in, hopefully by the end of this week. And then we'll start with a week without the cast, and then we'll start with cast on stage in 2 weeks, I believe.
So you're building this K-pop show.
Yeah.
And so how long have you been working on it?
We started in the shop on August 1st, and then the month prior to that was me sitting at a computer creating, the shop order, pretty much laying out the show electrically.
Well, how did you learn to become an electrician in theater? Is that what you went to school for?
No, I definitely went to school for accounting.
Man, are you screwed up?
I know. I don't know. It's an on the job type learn, I think. I learned to be an electrician, like how to load in, load out, stuff like that early on. And then as I got further in, the interest grew in being the person that did everything prior to the load in and load out. And actually laying out the show and figuring out and doing the puzzle, right?
Right.
The puzzle interested me.
So when you say load in, that's when they're building the shop, the theater, the show in the shop?
In the theater. If we're loading in, we're putting the show into the theater at that point.
And what is load out? When the show's over and you're taking it out?
Yep.
Okay. And sometimes you go on the road, so that's load in, load out.
Yeah, on a weekly basis, a daily basis, monthly basis.
How many electricians would work on a show like K-pop?
Right now, so in the shop, we did about 100 man days in the shop, 100 person days.
Right.
Over the course of 3 weeks. And then an average day in the theater has 12 electricians on it.
Okay.
10 to 12 just for lighting. There's a bunch more for video.
So K-pop is an exhilarating and euphoric new musical that takes you inside the culture-shaking K-pop universe.
I believe you.
It's a musical with a book by Jason Kim and music and lyrics by Helen Park and Max Fearn. How much interaction would you have with the people that are on stage or the people that write the show or stuff like that? Is that limited interaction because you're basically trying to make it work? I mean, this looks like a fantastic job trying to get all this to work electrically.
Interaction-wise, I generally have minimal. I'm not one to reach out to people for the most part. I kind of sit in the back of the room and put my computer monitors up around me and live in my own little world and wait for something to be a problem for me.
Right.
Getting this one in has been particularly difficult. The theater that we're going into is difficult on its own. It's not a traditional theater. It's an in the round situation. So this show already was particularly difficult, and we're shoving more gear into this theater than has been in there in a very long time, if ever. So it's been special. And then it's being lit like a concert, and there's there's sort of a lighting console, the control surface, that is much more used for concert event style lighting.
Right.
And then we have our one that is used primarily for theater type lighting. And so like that's the one that I'm used to, and that's the one that I have. I hadn't touched another console in probably 11 years, other than this one that's really aimed at the theater market. And we have the other one. There's more than two, but we have a different one that is mostly aimed at the concert market. And so anytime something's like, I don't know how this works, and it's like, what, the programmer chose this console. The programmer can answer these questions. And so she'll come in. She came in, started on Wednesday in the theater, and I was just like, all right, so ... this is how we would do it on the other console. You tell me how the hell it's done on this console. I have no idea.
I love how when you were telling me about that halfway through, I go, sure. Like I even have the remotest idea of what it is you're talking about. So are you ever sitting there during the show? Like, are you ever required to be at the theater when the show's actually on?
For this one, I will be there. I'll be required to be there for a bunch of the previews. So prior to official opening. But this one I will not stick around for. Once the show is open, it gets handed off to the crew, and I run away. Okay.
So you guys build the electronics, then another crew comes in generally to run the show.
Yeah, the people that are running the show are with us the whole time, like pretty much from day one in the shop all the way through the process. They are there. So they have as much knowledge about the show as anyone in the building would.
You must want to it'd be like, so, and then there's a lighting guy, because that's what Phil Monat does, right? He's a lighting guy.
Yeah, he's a lighting designer.
So does he tell you, like, he'll go, I need a light to point here, or that's already, like, how does he design how would the lighting guy and the electrician guy work together?
The lighting designer, so if it was Phil and I would get a plot from Phil. So he would have taken thought of everything that's happening in the show, what he wants to do when, how he wants to light it, and he would just draw it on a plot. Or he would plot it all out in computer anymore, but and then said, this is where I want everything. You get it there and make it work.
Right.
And then as things change, he'll say, well, actually, I need, 3 more lights over there to do this thing, and I need a light over there to do this thing. And, we do our best to.
Right, because you'll do all the electronics, you'll lay out the lights, then you'll get the cast in, and you'll rehearse the show, and he'll see where he wants different lights, and you'll see where the electronics isn't doing what it's supposed to do, and over that period of time, whatever it is, a week, 3 weeks, a month, whatever it is, you iron out all the bugs, and then you go live.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ever? Because I would like to sit with you one time when there's actually a show going on, and then the whole time you'd keep saying, "Don't touch that! Don't touch that!
Don't touch that!" That's my on the Evita tour. I wouldn't run the console, but I generally focus the show early on in the tour. Eventually, the board up started focusing the own show, and there'd be like times during the show where he's sitting on the left side, which is sort of like the operating side, and I'd be sitting on the right side of the console making edits as we went, and I'd be like, I'd hear the stage manager call a standby to take the next cue, and I'd be like, don't go until I tell you to. And like, because I'm editing something and I need to update before he goes because I don't want it to track. And it's like, no, a click. Okay, you can go.
Now that is the one thing I've learned from doing this podcast is I don't think people have any idea the amount of work, because you would hear that, as the years go by, a film costs, $10 million to make. And you would think to yourself, how do you chew through $10 million making a 2-hour movie? But in the entertainment industry, doing anything and for entertainment, and I mean, I've learned this through the podcast in a very small, but I understand now that it's just a massive job to produce an hour and a half of podcast entertainment. You don't just turn it on and run it. There's actually stuff to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, just labor alone in order to get the massive amount of gear in the building that we put in a building. Labor alone is a large chunk. I mean, a very, very large chunk, but
yeah. And they're all unionized guys and all this and on and on. I don't even know what the global K-pop phenomenon is, man. Does that ever put me in? Is it an Asian thing, K-pop?
I mean, it's Korean pop music.
Oh, okay.
And I guess it like
that's primarily what I listen to most days.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about it. My niece was my niece was like, "Oh my God, really?" And I was like, sure. I don't know. And it's funny. My niece is just recently started getting interested in theater, so I've been taking pictures or short videos in the theater every day and sending her
cool.
Sending her a little. I just sent you a message on Facebook Messenger of one of the little 3-second, 4-second videos that I sent her of sort of end of day of that day of load in.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's cool. Well,
yeah,
when you're sending them to your niece, sending them to me too. That's cool. Right. I know people in show business.
Yeah,
I know you and Phil. All right, so let's get back to. I want to get back to. So okay, because I wasn't shocked, but I was pretty excited when I found out you went to Tony. So you went to Phil's, and these guys are pretty serious operators. So did you feel like completely out of place and don't screw this up? Like, were you really nervous?
100%. Yes. And at Phil's, there was no, I didn't announce that I hadn't operated in this style of thing before.
Right.
And there was no everyone else is normal. So it was just like, all right, let's go. Sign up for, here's your first train out. See you later. And everyone makes their way out to the layout. And the yard ops, two of them duck, one of the yards, two of them duck under and they're in this enclosed space inside the yard. And there's a guy on the outside. And then in the far yard, they're in their own little cubby by themselves. And there was a bunch of road ops, and then operators and districts and whatnot. And I'm standing there near one of the yards and I'm like, there's all this immediately a lot of radio chatter and all these things happening. And I'm just standing there with this packet of cards, a radio and a throttle. And I'm just like,
yeah,
I don't know what the hell's happening. And, I sort of asked and everyone's immediately busy doing things. And I was just like, I don't even know who to ask. And I was like, so do I just, and they were like, yeah. And I was just like, yeah, I didn't even get the question out. And then Phil came over and he was like, everything okay? And I was like, dude, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. I don't, and he's like, all right, yeah, you're just going to, go. And I was just like, I need to call and ask permission to enter the right. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And so I'm listening to everyone else ask for things. And I was like, okay, this is sort of the pattern that I need to go for. And this is who I'm talking. I didn't know any of that. And so I'm just like, oh, okay, here we go.
Well, you're like me because Uncle Dave wants me to come over and operate his layout. And I keep saying I'm not coming, but I'm going to go. But I mean, I know these guys talk in the radio patter and the whole 9 yards. And I mean, when I operated my layout, it was pretty laid back. We had a system, and these guys are they're serious as a word, but I mean, it's they got the patter, they got the this, they got the that. And I'm thinking, man, I'm going to be way out of my element doing this.
Yeah. And one of the things on Rich, on Phil's layout, as I was going through there was I'm looking for, it's full signal controlled. So I'm going through signal to signal to signal and I'm looking at my notes and I was like, okay, I know I have to stop at, 76.4 or whatever it is. And I'm currently at 58 and I'm headed this way. And, I'm supposed to have point. There's control point at like 60, and there's another one at like 68 or something. And like next one I see is like a weird number. It's like jumped, and I was like, oh my god, I missed a control point somewhere. Somebody's gonna kill me. Blah 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 blah. And it's they're hidden. Those signals are hidden. So there's a panel up on the wall that shows what those signals are supposed to be showing. And I'm like freaking out, so I just stopped where I was, and they're like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I was like, this is a number higher than I'm supposed to have stopped at already. Like, what am I doing?" And they were like, "That's not." And it turns out that plaque, which has been up for a number of years, has the wrong number listed on it. But like, they all knew it. They didn't know that it had the wrong number on it. They all knew exactly what the layout was. So they'd look at the signal. They never read the words on it. And me being the first time there, I'm reading the words, and I'm like, something's terribly wrong. I've missed the control point I was supposed to stop at.
Yeah.
And I pointed out, and they were like, well, I'll be damned. Yeah. You're good. You can go all the way up to that one.
So
out of the way.
So when you were all done, were you kind of excited that you'd done it? Like it felt like a fairly successful evening?
Yeah. I mean, I was mostly just happy that people weren't screaming at me.
Yeah. Well, it must have been a pretty friendly crowd, though.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll get there are some people in the hobby that take great delight in finding people that that make mistakes. But I think that's rather far. From what I understand, Phil's is a pretty good crowd, and they enjoy having people there and everything.
Yeah.
So so from that, you then get an invite to Tony Koester's.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, I don't know how long it is out there. Luckily, I don't drive. I mean, I drive, but I don't have a car in New York. I don't drive in New York.
No.
And Phil's like, well, you can ride with me on my motorcycle.
Yeah, no, that ain't happening.
Yeah. I mean, if that's my option to get out there, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to, close my eyes and pray the whole way. Like I don't ride a motorcycle.
That's yeah.
And luckily I found, a vehicle that had walls and four wheels to get myself to get out there. And so some of the Long Island guys stopped on the way through at the bridge and picked me up, and we just crossed the bridge. I'm luckily on their way.
Right.
Which is nice. Train history of the area on the way out there because, they all know it like the back of their hands. There was a breakfast. We all sat down and had breakfast, so I at least knew some people walking in the door.
Does Phil do it at night, or does he do his during the day?
Phil's is during the day,
and then Tony's is during the day.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys met for breakfast and
then head over to Tony's. But I think it's 90 minutes to an hour, somewhere.
Yeah, to Newton.
90 minutes out there. Yeah,
Newton, New Jersey. Yeah.
And then this last time I went, I rode out there with Dave Barraza picked me up.
Oh, cool.
And we went out, I was like, Dave, wait, what time did your day start to pick me up at, 10:15 or whatever it was? And he was like, I was in the car at 8:45. And I was like, oh my God. A 3-hour drive for this operating session.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Dave will travel just about anywhere. We got to get him back on the podcast. He was down at Tom Jacobs, like I said. Was he wearing his AML hoodie when he picked you up?
He was not.
Oh.
We talked about that hoodie, and he was like, "Yeah, I bought one." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I talked about the artwork, and then Dave's like, "Yeah, I own it," and I was, and I was like, "Oh,
you're the guy."
Great. I don't follow it like.
Yeah, exactly.
That part all happens automatically.
Yeah, like they think that that somebody's bought a hoodie.
Yeah,
I know people will talk to me, Chris Adams, about a particular part of a particular show, and I'll go, I got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah,
refresh my memory. But it's the same with you. I bet you get that all the time, eh? People say, "Oh yeah, I bought a Athearn Genesis Norfolk Southern such and such," and I got it on last December. I bought it on the 13th of December, and you're like, they'll be like, you're staring at them like, yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah.
Once they find out you own the store, I know that must be kind of cool when people find out you're the guy that owns the store, eh?
Yeah, I was. I always think that I'm just under the radar. Like, right. Obviously, like I do a bunch of the podcasts, I do stuff like that, but like, most of the things I do are not video.
No.
So it's just a name. And depending on things like who it is and whatnot. And actually, I haven't even clocked it. Like, I don't know if we say Stephen or Steve on this podcast normally.
I don't know. I've lost count. I've tried to say, yeah.
But I don't. I also don't. I don't generally introduce myself with my full name. I generally just introduce myself as Steve. So unless somebody else is going to call it out,
See, I always thought you kind of went by Stephen.
yeah. So maybe we always use Stephen on here. I mostly go by Steve.
Do you?
Yeah.
I always thought you went by Steve. You seem more like a Stephen than a Steve to me.
Well, my mother would love you.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, I normally don't. I
Okay.
generally don't use my full name when I introduce myself to people. So like most of the time, it kind of just goes by. And so unless somebody knows, they already knows. But yeah, it's kind of funny when I met Dave was it last weekend or whatever, and he was like, "Oh, really?" You know, like, and I was just like, "What is happening?" Like, you know, I was just as excited to meet Dave as
As
right,
Dave.
like, oh, Dave's gonna be here. That's awesome. But you know, I always mentally I'm like, you know, I own a small store. No one really like.
Yeah.
It's not a name that people are going to be, you know.
Well, it's not a small store, and it's a big store, and it's getting more and more well known. And as time goes by, you're gonna become like a guy that I got Fred Hill. You're gonna become like Fred Hill. Fred Hill's owned the Whistle Stop in Sacramento or wherever it is, Pasadena, forever. I mean, I have yet to get him on the podcast, and I got to do that along with 1,000 other people. The problem is, you know what? I'm kind of lazy with the podcast. Because now that I'm at the 8-year mark, it's like you'll send me somehow. Well, it's like Dave said to me, "Oh, I met Steve Atwell," and I said, "Where?" And had Tony Koester, and I'm like immediately sending you a message, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I know Stephen has a headset. Boom, you're on the show."
Yeah,
that's kind of a cop out for me. Except people haven't heard you for like a year, so it's not. It's easy. It gets easier and easier for me to just do the show because I keep backtracking to people that have been on before that are interesting.
Yeah, and you know, and if they were interesting the first time, they generally have an interesting project that they were working on.
Yeah,
and so it's ripe to get a new update on whatever was happening.
Exactly. Like there's a show coming up called Do's and Don'ts of Rail Fanning, and I had Dave on and a fellow named Chris Wayman and Roger Coleman. Roger Coleman's relatively new to the hobby, but Chris Wayman has done dozens of videos for Green Frog Productions. And I mean, he's got the same enthusiasm as Dave does. And when I had him on that show, I thought, geez, I haven't done an update with Chris in like 3-4 years. So then we were talking today and we made arrangements and he's going to be on the show again. And I mean, it's super easy to talk to Chris because he's got lots of enthusiasm and lots of stuff he's always doing. And, you know, it's the same as you because this is a great story. We haven't even got to the heart of the matter. So these guys, when you were at Phil, they told you about Tony's. They kind of invited you to Tony's, not Tony.
Correct. Yeah, Phil tried to make it happen.
Okay.
There was 2 of us there that Phil was working on getting it in, like trying to get us in. And so Phil took care of it. And then I got an email from Phil that said, you know, you're in for the whatever date it was.
So the first time you go to Tony's, like you walk into the first time, you never probably met Tony before.
Right.
And so you had that excitement or that experience. And then when you went into the layout, like what was that? Was it kind of like, holy shit?
There was definitely some shock as I walked into the layout. And then as you get, you know, that nickel plate bridge with the road that goes underneath it that's been in every magazine, I think, ever. Where it always shows the picture from that Tony took with his father as a kid, and then the scene on the layout. Like, you know, I think everyone has seen that more than one time. When I finally made it around to that scene, I was like, "Holy shit! It's there!
Yeah,
there it is!"
Yeah. I know. And wait, you got to someday get out to Dave's. I'm sure you will now. But I mean, it's like going into the Keebler cookie elf tree. It's but yeah, okay. So then So did you go through the same kind of process at Tony's? Like here's a train and a bunch of, and you had no idea what you were doing?
No, that time they paired someone with me.
Okay.
As you know, so I operated and they were, you know, the conductor, you know, and so I had a safety net there.
Right.
Like there was someone there to be like, hey, don't screw up. Um, and then the second time I went out there, it was just, here you go, see you later.
Yeah, and then I heard from either you or Dave that he's going to have put up a nameplate for you.
Yeah, that was the first time I was out there. This time I came back, Tony sort of said, "Hey, let's start over here. I thought you were just a guest. I didn't realize you lived in New York, but now I'm putting the things together. Like you're here permanently." And then on the way out the door, and he said, you know, said many more times here, I'm gonna have a nameplate for you because everything's on a board there, and so there's names all across the board, and it's crazy because there are very famous railroad names on
Yeah.
tags on the board, and it's like, wow, this whole top row, I've heard of every single one of these people. They're on half the books that are in my in my bookcase. And then over on the right side, it's just like guest 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's just 4 tags that say guest. And it was like, holy crap! It's just cool to be like,
Yeah,
to potentially get a tag on the board.
Isn't that the weird thing about model railroading? It's kind of like this. When I was I was trying to describe it to somebody once, like 15 years ago, and after I'd been in model railroader so much, and I said, it's kind of weird. You walk into the hotel, and all of a sudden you're somebody, and you walk out of the hotel, and you're just Joe Blow.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like you go into Tony's house and you see all these nameplates of every, and you recognize everybody, all the names that are on there, and you're like of the who's who. Not necessarily the who's who. I don't even like that. And it's not necessarily that there's somebody's, but it's like because you're in the hobby and you know of these names, you can't help but go, yeah, hey, I know that guy, and I know that guy, and I know the next guy. That's pretty cool. It's pretty.
Yeah.
So when you went the second time, did they let you go by yourself?
That was, yeah. There was no instruction that time. And at one point, I was just like, everyone's like peeling off to there's 3 people that work that yard and 2 people that work this yard. And, the guy that ends up getting the trains on and off the layout all the time. And that's a full-time job just from just servicing that one yard, getting trains on and off the layout. Everyone's off to do, they're very dedicated. You have the 2 district operators or whatever they are, plus the dispatcher,
right,
or all of that. And then there's like 3 or 4 of us that are actually running the trains across the layout. And I was just, everyone's got all their instructions, and I'm just standing there like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And eventually, like, Dave and I are standing in front of the board, and I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Like last time I was here, guest 2 was stuck to this thing already, and I knew I was running that train at that time. But now, like, the columns, there's just open cells in the columns. I don't know, like, do I just drag my name to one? And like, and eventually Dave came over and was like, well, you want the first one or the second one, And so, I think he took the first one, and I was like, okay, I get it now. I just put my tag on the wall and I just go, and, put my tag on the wall for the train number and looked it up in the timetable. And I was like, oh, good. I don't leave until, I don't know if the session started at midnight or whatever time it was, but I had, an hour and 45 minutes until my train needed to go. And I was like, all right, I can do this. And luckily, like the first train I had of the day was the passenger. So it's just one into the other, stopping at stations. I don't have to worry about any of the like intricacies of anything. I'm just going. Everyone else is just supposed to get the hell out the way. So I was like, well, this is a good first one. Great. Here we go.
And so do you feel like, have you been enjoying it?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy operating. I've always enjoyed, I generally end up running, the road trains. So it's a lot of like go.
Yeah.
I very much enjoy like the switching puzzle style of operating as well. So like it's a different style of operating than I'm used to. I'm used to like switching in a yard or switching out industries and stuff like that. And like, that's not what I'm dropping cars on the side and moving on. But it's entertaining for sure.
Yeah. Cause for me, I think I just thought of this. I think what I was trying to think of, but for me, all I've really ever known you as is this guy that's feverishly building this fantastic model railroad shop. I really never really, I mean, of all the time we've spent together, and we've spent enough time together, that we really never got into the discussions of model railroad operations. And I don't even know if I even really figured that you were that interested in it. But,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, because all I really knew of you was Stephen Atwell feverishly building this fantastic model railroad shop. And now it sounds like model railroad operations has always been something you've been interested in.
Yeah, and every layout I've ever built has always been built for me to operate. Like, um, I've never been interested in the door layout that just goes in a circle.
Right.
So even the layouts on the shop, like the shop, where the primary focus of the two layouts in the shop are going in a circle, right? Like the whole goal of a layout in the store is to have trains run while people are there. But even when I designed those layouts, I made sure that maybe when people weren't there, or if we wanted to teach people to operate, or the HO layout actually stays, especially on weekends. I would say there's generally not a train running in a circle around that layout, because most weekends there are groups of people there just operating the layout for 8 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
So you guys got, like, are these guys that come in just to operate the layout, or?
Yeah, I mean, they do some shopping as well, but their primary reason that they are there is operating the layout. We've got a railroad conductor for KCT that comes in all the time and operates, and then a bunch of his friends come in, and it's their hangout, right? Like they hang out at the store and run trains, and they'll stop and go to lunch and come back and run trains, and then they'll stop and go to dinner, and they'll come back and run trains into the evening. He specifically used to be one of our employees, so like he spent a year and a half with us.
Sure.
Or a year with us before that. So like in the evening, we have no problem letting him be in the store with people beyond our open hours. But yeah, there are days that my phone will go off that say the front door just unlocked and locked, and it's like Darius leaving at 11:30 at night, with a group of 3 of his friends.
You should have somewhere on your website about your layout, because that'd be cool to see.
We should do that. Yeah.
Because I love the new website. It's pretty cool, and it's working pretty flawlessly now, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Man, I was unprepared for the learning curve. I say that every time we move to any sort of new software, and you think you would get better with it over time, but like, you can go through all of the instructions and all of the classes and all of the things with all of the people that are supposed to teach you all the things about the software. And then 2 days into using it, something comes up and you're like, well, this was never covered. What the hell?
And then you're trying to figure out, the world is changing so friggin' fast. It's like, okay, I got a couple other questions. So who is Stephen Rice? He keeps writing in emails and saying, Stephen Rice, the uncle of the best employee at Midwest Model Railroad.
I don't know who Stephen Rice is.
He's the uncle, Stephen Rice, uncle of the best employee at Midwest Model Railroad. And I still don't know who that employee is. And apparently you don't either.
Maybe it might be Nate's uncle.
Okay.
There is and is his name Stephen? He and my father talk often.
Okay.
That's the only uncle, that's the only specific uncle that I know of that comes into the shop. He's part of the, he's always come to the shop anyway, but his nephew is Nate, one of our employees. Nate just went back to school, which is unfortunate for us because he's not there on 4 days a week anymore.
Well, that's because he's the best employee at Midwest Model Railroad.
But yeah, and he still does a bunch of work for us, which is great. Like, before he left for school, we talked about if he would be interested in doing some remote work, because there's a bunch of stuff that obviously I would love to unload.
What kind of remote work would he do? Like filling up ordering stuff, or what?
No, he's doing all of our newsletters, getting out all the information about what's arrived, when it arrives, all of that type of stuff.
That's a big job.
He was very busy this week, because I think every single day this week we had new Atlas, new Athearn, new AccuRail, new Maloka. Like today, this past week was just an unbelievable number of brand new shipments for rolling stock and locomotives. Like nothing we have ever seen. They all had massive amounts of stuff arrive this past week.
Yeah, Moloko's got a whole pile of stuff here on your website.
Yeah.
Is this hobby just like growing like nuts or something?
It and new manufacturers.
Yeah.
Have you heard about First Class? Is it First Class? Oh man, now
I know the guys you're talking about.
Yeah,
Class 1.
Class 1. They just came out of nowhere. I mean, I know that the guys that are involved in the company have been around the model railroad industry for years, but like, hey, another new company manufacturing, and like, and their release is starting this fall. It's like they've got 48-foot containers. They have that TW10 well car. Let's call it TW10.
That's like our buddy Lauren James at Otter Valley Railroad here in Tilsonburg, my back still. I'm sure you're a huge Stompin' Tom Connors fan, eh?
He says you want to work in the tobacco fields of Tilsonburg. My back still aches when I hear that word. Well, he said, I'll only give you $7 a day, but if you're any good, you get a raise in pay. Your bed's already on the bunkhouse floor. If it gets a little chilly, you can close the door in Tilsonburg. My back still aches when I hear that word.
He's a Canadian. He is a Canadian icon, country / folk singer.
Gotcha.
But he was a total original. He's very Canadian. And one of his songs was Tilsonburg. And young Lauren, he's not young. He's about your age. So I guess both you guys, young Stephen and young Lauren, he's getting into the freight car manufacturing business. And it's fun. I actually got a great idea. I think it was Lauren or you. I think it might have been your idea, actually. Or the two of you came up with it or something. But having a show with you and Lauren and possibly Chris Brimley of Exactrail or Train Life, and having the three of you guys, your three retail guys on, discussing the world of model railroad retail. Because, you haven't given any thought to making anything, have you? Because that seems to be the next thing that everybody does.
So Class 1, they've got that TWF10, and then I had 2 days off, so I hopped on a plane and flew to the National Train Show.
Oh, did you?
St. Louis. I did. I was there for Saturday and then flew back first thing Sunday morning.
Cool.
They announced a GP40 at the National Train Show. And the GP40 is supposed to be next year. Like, they're hitting the ground running.
Well, that's what Lauren's doing. Lauren James of Otter Valley. I mean, he's created this one car, and he's already got 2 or 3 or 4 others in the. And I'm like, man, I think this hobby is just growing like crazy. Even though you've hit a lull in the action because of COVID being over, I don't think it's even going to come close to slowing down.
Does he have? What cars does he have an announcement about his cars that he's?
I don't know if he has an announcement. I probably can talk about that. It's I don't know. It depends on when this goes out. I think he has an announcement. This is always the most exciting part of the podcast is when I start typing in Google and to see if I can figure stuff out because.
All right. Well, I can fill the air while you talk. I can say that Fox. So Scale Trains and Fox Valley Models made an announcement at the InScale convention this year.
Right.
That Scale Trains bought the majority of the Fox Valley Models line.
Right.
And that immediately scared the crap out of me because we don't carry Scale Trains, but we love Fox Valley Models.
Right.
Like it's an InScale line. I mean, they do some HO stuff as well, but like the InScale stuff that they produce was fantastic models, a great price point, and like anytime they made an announcement, we filled our shelves with them. And now we're losing the availability of this line to us.
Right.
And so I think based on some research on my part and talking to some people, I think we're going to start seeing a slew of new manufacturers because the process from start to finish to wanting to create a new car has become much less expensive than it was, and relatively easy to navigate.
Yeah, like people are starting to do it now from where they never even. Yeah, like I always talk about Keith Revell, Models in Edmonton, Alberta, where the guy's building a Shay, and I've interviewed him a couple of times, and it's like, well, I Googled it. I'm like,
Yeah.
What do you mean you Googled it? You know, eh,
I can say that I'm not in the immediate market to start manufacturing something, but I wanted to so seeing Class 1 pop up and seeing these few others that have popped up recently, seemingly out of nowhere, where all we've been told for years and years, how expensive it is to make that first car.
exactly. Yeah.
And I was like, no, like there's no way. Something has clearly changed, right? Like something has changed. And so I reached out and I found a manufacturer who was willing to talk to me, to just talk to me about it.
Okay.
And, I'm not in the market immediately, but, I'm just curious about numbers, what it would take. And they were happy to discuss it with me, knowing that, on their side, why not discuss it with me? If he becomes in the market to create something, we would most likely reach out to them first. Like, why wouldn't we? Because they were so happy to talk to us about it in the past.
Right. Okay. Now, are you talking about a manufacturer in China, or somebody on the state side that's like
in China?
Wow.
So that would be like, so from starting from scratch,
Right.
You're not producing, not doing a special run of, let's say an Intermountain car that's come out already,
Right,
with something special on it, like a full from scratch car. And it's like, if you can so from what I could understand, or I mean, they spoke English well. They spoke
Sure.
English. I mean, not as good as a
I get it.
language,
I get it.
but
Yeah.
So it's not that
you could easily.
I couldn't understand him.
Right.
From what I got from him.
Right.
If I could provide them build drawings, they would do all of the CAD work. And he sent me some examples of CAD work they've done for other models, and they the work is phenomenal.
Wow.
And okay, so I have to do, as a client, I would be responsible for doing the research and getting them dimensions and getting them all the information and getting them everything. But then they take care of it from there. And then they go into, they go from there to a 3D printing situation to get you prototype, the prototypes of the cars, so you can discuss it, and they can go back and make edits. And then there's another 3D printed prototype. And okay, now we've already cut out 4-8 molds. And then by the time you're happy with, okay, yes, we should produce this, now we go to tooling up. And,
right.
And so instead of doing temporary tools or anything like that, like you're tooling up one time. And so that cost only comes, you're paying, you have to pay them to do the design work. You have to pay them to do, the editing and revisions and stuff like that. And then you pay them to tool it up and run it. There's no more back and forth retooling, we found this mistake, we need to redo that tool. It's just, we can solve all these problems
before you even get to the tooling.
Before you get to the tooling, because they can 3D print it on some of the best 3D printers in the world. Like,
wow, yeah, that's the thing. That's like Tim Warris at Fast Tracks. He has like a 3D printer that's like $30,000 that does something special that creates these 3D prints that he uses to produce other things somehow. I mean, I don't understand it, but yeah, they're the best 3D printers in the world. So I'm wondering if this is because that Sandokan went out of business, and then all of a sudden a bunch of other, it sounds like there's way more than just one manufacturer now in China creating model railroad products. It sounds like there's several.
Yeah, I mean, there are manufacturers, are major manufacturers in our market already that are produced in China that have moved manufacturers a couple times since all of that happened.
Well, how did you find a manufacturer? Did you Google it?
Actually, I did, and I found like 3 or 4, And as I was like, in the strangest coincidence ever, as I was writing one of them an email, and granted, the email had sat on my desk for like 2 days as I was trying to figure out how to I'm really just inquiring about information at this point.
Sure.
I got a Facebook message from a guy that was like, we produce blah, 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 and sent me like 3 or 4 pictures of, samples. And I just sent him a Facebook message back, and I was like, do you want to talk about what this process entails? And he sent me a WeChat link, and we just started like what in the hell? I was about to write an email to like these.
So these guys are
filling out my blanket. Like I'm going to send this to 3 people and see which one talks to me. And in the meantime, just a completely random, not one of them, just boom, I get a Facebook message it wasn't to me personally. It was
I get it.
They were they saw Midwest Model Railroad and thought, let's reach out to them. Maybe, the guy's job is to drum up sales, right? Or drum up orders. Let's reach out to these. Maybe these people would be interested in producing something. And so I was like, you know what? Normally this this message would just get deleted, but you hit me on the right day. Let's chat.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I think, shows you exactly what's happening to the industry, because now you got guys, manufacturers in China doing cold calls.
Yeah.
Because they see a market for this. They see that it's worth their opportunity to go out and find guys that want to find people that want to, or find companies that want to manufacture products. It is well worth their time and effort to go out and do some cold calls.
Right. They've got excess time on their machines. Let's find people that would be willing to eat up that time that we have in excess on our machines.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to work 24 hours a day. Why don't we have 24 hours worth of work?
Yeah, exactly. And they're now cold calling. Well, that's like, by the way, the car that Lauren James at Otter Valley is making is the National Steel 6400 high side gondola, used in waste management and construction site. I'm talking to him right now as we speak.
Nice.
Yeah, and then he's got another car. What has he got? And then the next thing he announced was he's got a flat car. What do you call it? What do you call those cars that are flat?
Yeah.
So okay. All kidding aside, I mean, you got plenty to do. That's an interesting problem, that Fox Valley thing with scale trains. I don't fully understand that whole. I mean, I don't understand the whole scale. I understand what they're doing, but I don't understand what they're doing by trying to eliminate every hobby store on the face of the planet.
Right.
I don't get it. Because there will always be a place for the Otter Valleys, the Midwest Model Railroads, the Exact Rails and Train Life. There will always be a place for these well-established companies and that know how to run a business. There will always be a place for you, and you will always be a vital part of the hobby. They cannot, no matter what they do, they cannot eliminate you.
Right. I actually spoke with Shane at the train show about, what do we need to do to have it in the store? Right. Like, and, and my piece was this, like, we're the largest train store in the country.
Right.
The people are in the store all the time. When people ask questions, the last words out of my mouth currently would be scale trains.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
Why? There's no point in me promoting the brand. Like, you want a high-end locomotive? Here's Athearn Genesis.
Yeah.
Here's Atlas Gold Line stuff. Like,
yeah, like you eventually,
as a retailer, without carrying their brand, they don't exist in our vocabulary.
Yeah, like I try to make it really clear here on the podcast that you know me well enough. It's like, I'm not trying to play favorites, but it seems to me kind of friggin' obvious that if you're not willing to have Midwest Model Railroad as part of your team, then it's like you say, the last thing out of your mouth you're ever going to say to any customer is the word scale trains.
Yeah, and there's no, at the end of the day, we're running a business. Like,
yeah, like regardless of how many pieces of scale train product you might sell in a year, it is to their advantage for you to be a distributor for them, so that they have that that out there, that when people come into the store, not only are you going to see the other products, they're going to see scale trains, regardless of, even if you sold, for every one scale train locomotive you sold 50 Athearn ones, they would still want to be on the shelf and still be available so that you can say their name. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's like comparing it to a gas station. It's like, I wouldn't, well, you could buy our gas here, but you should know the gas across the street is better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very odd. I get it and I don't get it all in the same. So the other car these guys, that Otter Valley is making, is a 52-foot, 100-ton bulkhead flat car. That's the next thing that's coming there, coming from them. So I mean, that's probably what Lauren has found out. I know he has a good relationship with Rapido, and so all right. Here's the last subject of the day we're going to talk about. This is strictly business. You and I are, because at the old AML network, transparency is number one. It's paramount in the whole production of this podcast. Accuracy really is of no concern to us, but transparency is huge. So I have had a half a dozen people approach me about advertising on the free channel. And I'm starting to weaken now, because it's obvious that there are a few companies that want to advertise on the free channel. But so my problem is, I talk about you guys all the time. So now we got to figure out what to do, because I don't know what to do, because I'm new at this. So we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that off the air.
Right.
But now everybody knows that we're going to talk about it. It's fascinating. It's like, all I ever started to do with this goofy podcast was I was thinking, oh, this might be fun. I wonder if anybody will listen. And now here I am 8 years later, and it's like I keep saying to a couple of them, I don't know. Well, we'll pay you X number. Well, do I? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, yeah, but, and all right. Okay, I'll talk to you. Anyways, that's, we killed an hour and 36 minutes.
And time flies, man.
Yeah, we only basically scratched the surface of everything. I mean, I'm like, my mouth is watering to ask you 1,000 questions about this manufacturer. Like, that's just, like, I'm just like, oh my God. because the other thing I was saying, I saw on, James Wright had posted on his Facebook page. So there was a race car, the last race at Daytona, the second race of the year at Daytona, which was in late August. There was a race. One of the cars was sponsored by Horizon Hobbies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And James Wright was complaining that what a waste of advertising dollar. And I said to him, I think you're missing the point here. The point is they've got enough coin that they can advertise on a race car, because hobbies are growing that much. Like,
yeah, I saw that post and I was looking at the car, and like Horizon had sent something out at some point, telling all of us that they were doing it with like really high quality pictures of the car, and feel free to tag on advertising type things, use this in your store, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I never like looked at it that closely until James posted a picture and I was trying to zoom in. It was like Hobbytown, USA is like a third of every name on the car hood.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they wanted you to pay, I guess, pony up some dough to have the Midwest.
No, I think it's just, I think they probably, I didn't look at it that closely, but my guess is I don't know if they didn't go alphabetical, but like if every hobby town in the country has its own dealership,
right,
with Horizon, they've got 6 hobby times for every Midwest model railroad.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, for sure. But I thought my point was that's how much the hobby industry is growing, whether it's model railroading or whatever it is. These guys have got enough coin I don't care if you sponsor a race car for a year or for one race. It ain't cheap no matter what you're doing, especially a car that's going to be at Daytona.
Yeah.
I mean, this car is a back marker. It's not one of the front running cars, although it was in the lead when it crashed. but it looked good when that horizon looked good as the hood came flying up.
It got a bunch of extra airtime because of it.
Well, yeah, and I mean the amount of airtime. I'm always amazed at my business always ran on word of mouth. I advertised a little bit in the old days, but primarily it was all word of mouth. And then once social media came, I was all about social media and Facebook. And I mean, Facebook is like, we advertise on Facebook, and it's like you get your money back tenfold. And so that was always where my business was. So I mean, I never really paid any attention to any of this stuff that much. But holy mackerel, I'll be watching a race, and some car will go by with, I don't know, HarrisonBrothers.com, and then you'll be sitting there with your phone, and you'll type in HarrisonBrothers.com. And they go, oh, they sell those, and occasionally you'll buy one of whatever it is the cars are selling.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what advertising is. All right, where do you find the best place to advertise for your business?
We find the best. I don't even know if it's the best bang for our buck, but it's the what can provide us the most analytics to tell us how well we're spending our money is online advertising through Google, using Google's platform, because it can tell us, it can give us all of the analytics we could ever want to find out how much bang for our buck we're getting.
So I remember you showing me all that stuff once too, and like I'm thinking to myself, so are you just like a really, really smart guy?
If you believe that, I've got you fooled. Well,
well, you taught yourself how to become a Broadway electrician because you're kind of a guy that's sort of in charge of a crew, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're not just a guy sweeping the floor. You're a guy that's in charge. I want to. Let's just finish with this. Are you still working on that thing where you can get me some sort of a bit part?
It's definitely not going to be in this one. I believe your skin color is incorrect.
The old white guy comes out on the stage in K-pop. I could be the old grumpy guy where you go, "Hey, you kids, get off of this street."
Yeah.
All right, that's it. We're done. Because you got to go to bed because you're working long hours right now.
I am working long hours. Tomorrow's Labor Day, though, so I get a day off.
Yeah. So what you were saying to me before that you're not going to be able to operate for a couple of months because you're only going to get like 24 hours a week off?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not working around the clock, but the daily schedule ends up being like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., which when your commute's 45 minutes one way and 40, when you have, and then a 90-minute round trip commute, I pretty much get home, shower, sleep, get up, go back to work.
Because where's the warehouse?
6 days a week.
Where's the warehouse?
This in the theater. It's on between 50th and 51st.
And you are at
Circle in the Square,
which is roughly like what's the cross?
Oh, where am I? I am at 178.
And it takes you 45 minutes to get there?
So it takes me, by the time you wait for the train, depending on if you just miss it, in a good time, I can get there in about 30.
So I guess. And how often are you taking the B line, the A line?
I'm on the A train.
The A train.
Yeah. In the morning, it seems to run every about 4 to 6 minutes, if like right at rush hour. So between 7 and 9 a.m., there seems to be a train every 4 to 6 minutes or so.
Are they really busy, or are they packed? Or
they're packed. Not at 7 a.m. At 7 a.m., I might still find a seat. At 7:15, I will not.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's like driving through Toronto. If you get there before 7, you're okay, but after 7 and before 9, you're pooched. You can't move. Trana.
Yeah. If you leave at 6:30, you can be there by 7. But if you leave at 6:35, you can get there at 7:45.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the question you got to ask yourself is, why am I getting up so early, anyways?
Right.
So when are you going to go back? That's cool that you went to the St. Louis for a day. When are you going back to Kansas City?
I believe I will make it back to Kansas City for maybe a week or two in December.
Okay.
Yeah, and then my next thing my next physical appearance with Midwest is going to be, we're going to go to Train Fest in November.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What do you hear about that? Is it going to be anything like it was?
I don't know. It seems that they've already extended their deadline, their early bird deadline a couple times, which makes me think they're still looking for numbers for vendors.
Right.
But they're out at the fairgrounds or the
same place.
Same place.
Oh, okay.
I guess the buildings that they're in are different at the grounds because they say that, you know, you may not have the same spot. You're probably not going to get the same spot because we're in different things. So like, it's not like, oh, AML's always in the back of the main building at the Big E. Like you may be in a different location, but you know, I expect that when I go to these types of things.
John Sacerdoti is going to let us have the 3 tables that Jim Sacco had all those years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we get to take over that spot.
Nice.
And I want to do something. I got to figure out some way. I want to at least put City Classics somewhere on there because Jim was so excited, got so into us being the AML gang being there at his booth. That's probably one of the nicest things about this podcast that ever happened to me was that Jim was just like thrilled that the AML Nation his booth became the headquarters for the AML Nation at the Springfield or the National Train Show or whatever. He just thrilled with that, so then I said to John Sacerdoti, I said, man, I don't know where I'm going to go. And between the two of us, we realized, well, why don't you just take the 3 tables that Jim had and just set yourself up there? And I'm like, yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
So that'd be cool. So we'll have our own spot. So if you're looking for some place to store your stuff when you come to Springfield, just come on over to the AML booth where City Classics used to be.
I think I will probably go to Springfield again this year.
I think you should. Now that you're such a big shot in the operating scene in the New York City area. Now that you're in the know, now that you're in demand for operations. Let's put it that way. You're in demand. You got to get out to Dave Barraz's one day too. Do you ever?
Dave does remote operations as well.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Is he getting into that? I got to have him back on the show. Can't have anybody.
Are we on the air still? I've forgotten already.
Yeah, we are. We didn't sign off yet.
Gotcha.
I know it's not very well organized. We're transparent, but we're not organized.
Yes, you're transparent.
Yeah,
I've got stories to tell you as soon as you stop recording. But
okay, all right. So we got an email address. I think this is going to be on the free channel. We got an email address, and that is at modelerslife@gmail.com. That's modelers with 1 L like railroad, not 2 L's like Atwell.
Right.
And then if you want to go, and if you didn't pick that up, if you just go to our website, amodelerslife.com, and you just click on the picture of the moderately agitated mailboy, boom. You automatically, the email comes up. All you got to do is fill in the subject line in your text, and you're ready to go. And then, Stephen, can I ask you a question?
Of course. That's what I'm here for.
Have you ever wanted a T-shirt with a hot dog on it?
I always want a T-shirt with a hot dog on it.
Well, you are in luck, because if you go to Midwest Model Railroad, and their URL is midwestmodelrr.com, and you go to their website, and you scroll across, you go all the way to the right on the menu bar, and you click on AML, boom, you are in a wonderland of AML merchandise, hats, hoodies, T-shirts, mugs, and in there you will find a T-shirt with a hot dog on it.
Yeah, that, and you can, if you wanted to, you can just scroll down until you see a picture of Lionel at a desk and click on that too.
Well, you can click on that too, yeah, which is actually hilarious. Which is, now I get it. I get it now. It took me a while, but now I get it. Have you ever shopped at Midwest Model Railroad?
I absolutely have shopped at Midwest Model Railroad.
Well, let me tell you, the next time you shop there, leave them a Google review. Give them a 5-star Google review.
I got in trouble for trying to do so. Turns out my account is linked.
Somehow I understand what that is, because I may have done the same thing myself.
Yeah, you cannot do this. Oh, okay.
And the other thing is, I got to tell you, if you enjoyed this podcast and you'd like twice as much podcasting every week, you get on Monday is the free one. And then on Tuesday, there's another podcast, which is on our Patreon channel. And Stephen, for just 365 payments of 16 cents a day, you can have twice as much podcasting fun each week.
That's I belong to that club.
I know you do. Well, and I think also you're pretty familiar with Midwest Model Railroad.
I belong to that club too.
Yeah. You belong to a lot of clubs.
Yeah.
Did Tony know that you own Midwest Model Railroad?
I think Phil introduced me that way.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm telling you, about that's going to become. It is going to be like the one of the premier shops of all the land, and I'm sure you ship all across around the world.
Yeah, I mean, if we become one of the premier shops, I'm excited by that venture.
I think you will. So, are you up for having a podcast with you and Lauren James of Otter Valley and maybe Chris Brimley of Train Life?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that'd be a great one. Okay, I think that's it. Are you ready?
Yes.
So remember, a Modeler's Life podcast is considered marginally adequate by 6 out of 10
Chinese railroad manufacturers.
Mr. Strang's wardrobe provided by The Dashing Camper. For all your fashion and tent repair needs, trust The Dashing Camper.
It's another Lincoln Homer.
Now that's a good one. I like that. Chinese railroad manufacturers. Nice one.
Let's keep it on topic.
Yeah. Let's stay on topic. Stay on point.